Remember the previous module discussed problem statements and how they're developed. The problem statement developed in transportation planning should be transferred to project development at the start of the scoping process to be used as the basis for developing the purpose and need of the project. This module will discuss CP1. We will start with an introduction to CP1, which is composed of two separate elements. 1. Purpose of and need for the proposed action, and 2. Defining the study area. We will touch on why these two elements are important and how they initiate a proposed project. Then we will move on to discuss the specific steps building up to the CP1 meeting for processes 1 and 2, including information required to present to the project team at the meeting. Process 3 will be discussed in Module 10. Finally, we will look at examples of projects that have gone through CP1 and review the highlights of Concurrence Point 1. First, let's discuss the first element of CP1, purpose and need. Under the merger process, the phrase purpose and need generally refers to Concurrence Point 1. The purpose of and need for a proposed action is defined in a broad context as the general intent and justification for an intended action to address a specified transportation-related problem. The purpose and need should clearly demonstrate that a need exists and should define the need in terms understandable to the general public. A clear and precise purpose and need is very important in establishing the basis for identification of a range of alternatives. The purpose and need statement is the foundation supporting the entire merger process and NEPA and Section 404 requirements, and subsequently the ultimate goal of merger, constructing a successful project. The need for a project essentially justifies the project in terms of expenditures of funds as well as the impacts that might result. Needs for the proposed action generally fall under one or more of the following areas: capacity deficiencies, safety, system linkage, travel time access needs, traffic compatibility, legislative mandate, economic development, land use changes. The purpose or purposes of the project would be defined as objectives to satisfy the need or needs of the project. Each of these areas will be discussed in more detail later in this presentation. The second element of CP1 is determining the limits of the project study area. The project study area is defined as the area between logical termini in which alternatives can be developed that meet the defined purpose and need for the proposed improvement. What is logical termini? Logical termini area are essential rational endpoints for a proposed transportation improvement and are also defined limits for a corresponding review of environmental impacts. The logical termini must be established such that the project demonstrates independent utility, that is, it does not rely on other planned or programmed actions for its functionality. Note that some technical studies occurring during the NEPA process may use modified study areas for analysis purposes. An example would be an indirect and cumulative effects analysis. The project study area should encompass the geographic limit of direct impacts for any alternative studied during the process. Defining the study area at CP1 is important because it sets a reasonable area for identification and analysis of potential alternatives. It should be definitive, but should also be flexible, should reasonable and feasible alternatives occurring outside of the defined area arise during the course of study. This is an example of a project that was developed to relieve congestion on several existing major transportation corridors, as well as in the downtown area located to the east. You will note a few things. There is a new road under construction to the north and east that will provide a circumferential route around the downtown area. It also provides east-west connectivity between primary north-south routes. Traffic along the existing network is expected to increase, causing operation concerns. The programmed project shown in blue and labeled as the TIP project provides a link bypassing the intersection, represented by the yellow star, and provides connectivity to and extending the circumferential route under construction and soon to be operational. Note the wetland system in the center of the TIP project area and a historic property at the southern terminus of the TIP project. The wetland system lies between two densely populated residential areas. Note also that there have been discussions about continuing with an additional east-west circumferential to the south, although it is not currently programmed. This project demonstrates independent utility, but should be developed in a fashion that it does not preclude the future transportation considerations. Initially, the study area was created relatively tightly around the programmed project evaluated in a feasibility study. Issues arose regarding potential direct and indirect effects to the historic property. Further, the ability to develop alternatives in the center portion of the study area will be difficult due to the residential areas and wetland system that lies between them. It became evident that flexibility in developing the study area was needed. It was expanded to include a broader area to accommodate a wider range of alternatives. Note that the need would likely still be met. We will look at this example again in the CP2 module when we discuss alternatives. Why is achieving Concurrence Point 1 important? Establishing Concurrence Point 1 provides the foundation upon which justification for the project is established under NEPA and Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. It provides a baseline need from which alternative scenarios can be developed. A clear and well-justified purpose and need statement explains to the public and decision-makers that the expenditure of funds is necessary and worthwhile. In addition, although environmental impacts are expected to be caused by the proposed project, the purpose and need should justify why impacts are acceptable based on the project's importance. Avoidance and minimization measures taken during the steps leading up to the Concurrence Point 1 meeting include considering environmental resources within the project area when developing the study area or identifying logical termini. For instance, if there is a large resource, be sure to make the study area large enough so that resource can be avoided. Also, consider if a project need will result in unnecessary or unwanted impacts, direct or indirect. Allow for a range of alternatives to be evaluated. Keep in mind that the outcome may be totally different than what was depicted on a long-range plan or transportation improvement map. This slide depicts a snapshot of the specific steps associated with building to Concurrence Point 1. Process 1, projects on new location, move through a series of 6 steps to the Concurrence Point 1 meeting. Process 2, widening and other improvement projects, move through a series of 8 steps to converge with Process 1 at the Concurrence Point 1 meeting. Now we are moving into Process 1 and the actual steps involved with Concurrence Point 1. Note that Process 1 does not formally have a step for citizen involvement, as does Process 2. However, stakeholder involvement in the development of purpose and need is necessary and is specified in Section 6002 of the Safe, Accountable, Flexible, and Efficient Transportation Equity Act, Legacy for users of 2005, also known as Safety Law. So public involvement would technically be a part of the process between Steps 5 and 6, where projects requiring a federal environmental impact statement require public involvement prior to Concurrence Point 1. We'll discuss this in a bit more detail once we get to that step in the process shortly. Step 1 in Process 1 is the initiation of the project study. The Council on Environmental Quality, CEQ, defines scoping as the early and open process for determining the scope of issues to be addressed and for identifying significant issues related to the proposed action. The process should also identify and eliminate from detailed study the issues which are not significant or that were covered under a previous environmental review. The project study or scoping begins by gathering background data. The responsibility for initiating the project study, or Step 1, is NCDOT and FHWA if it is a federally funded project. Step 2 in Process 1 is data collection. Collection of available data includes aerial photography and background data necessary to discuss the project in a scoping meeting or start of study meeting. Sources may be identified by responses to initial letters or other sources meeting standard requirements. Step 3 in Process 1 is to develop the project team. For all projects, merger screening can take place any time after the project receives funding and is scheduled in the TIP and when the project is moved into project development. After merger screening has taken place and the project has been placed in the merger process, then project team members will be identified by NCDOT in consultation with input from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the North Carolina Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and the Federal Highway Administration. Notification is made to team members when NCDOT distributes informational packets. If an agency declines to participate on the team, or if an agency drops from the team during the process, their decision needs to be documented in writing. The responsibility for Step 2 and 3 is NCDOT. Step 4 in Process 1 is Project Scoping. An internal scoping meeting is held to orient transportation personnel within NCDOT, FHWA, and local planning organizations, such as MPOs and RPOs, to a project. Internal scoping provides an opportunity for participants to transfer known information and history of the project, identify problems, concerns, or major constraints, examine potential solutions, and identify and plan actions, assignments, and timeframes for moving the project forward. A start of study letter is used to inform agencies or other stakeholders whom NCDOT does not normally coordinate with about the start of the project development phase. The letter invites their comments as well as offers them a chance to request to be involved in the project. The start of study letter is also sent to the NCDOT Board of Transportation member that represents the project area. An external scoping meeting is held to begin early coordination efforts with resource agencies and other stakeholders. Only NCDOT staff that is needed to explain information at the meeting should attend. The external scoping meeting provides an opportunity to acquaint our agency partners with the project, share known information about the project area, and the purpose and need for the project. Agency representatives will bring information about their particular resource and any potential significant issues or concerns to the meeting to discuss. The responsibility for Step 4 is NCDOT. Step 5 in Process 1 is issuing the Notice of Intent. A Notice of Intent is an announcement published in the Federal Register that informs the public that an Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS, is required and will be prepared to address a project's potential environmental impacts. If NCDOT and FHWA determine an Environmental Impact Statement should be prepared, a Notice of Intent will be filed in the Federal Register. If it is not clear at this point whether an EIS will be warranted, the decision to file a Notice of Intent can be delayed. Note, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency states that 5% or less of all projects meet the criteria for a Notice of Intent and subsequent Environmental Impact Statement. The responsibility for Step 5 is NCDOT in conjunction with FHWA. For projects requiring an Environmental Impact Statement and to meet safety law requirements, NCDOT will present preliminary purpose and need information to the public to solicit input on the purpose and need and potential study alternatives. This can be in the form of a public meeting, a website, newsletter, and/or press release. The responsibility for conducting public involvement is NCDOT. Step 6 in Process 1 involves developing the purpose and need. The project development engineer will prepare a draft purpose and need report, which will be developed using the problem statement from transportation planning, if one was developed, or else using data collected during scoping. Previously prepared reports or studies can also be used, such as the feasibility study, comprehensive transportation plan report, traffic forecast report, traffic capacity analysis report, traffic safety report, as well as information contained in the community characteristics report, to name a few. The responsibility for Step 6 in Process 1 is NCDOT in conjunction with FHWA if the project is federally funded. It is the responsibility of the NCDOT project development engineer for scheduling, preparing the meeting materials, and presenting the information at the Concurrence Point 1 meeting. Before we talk about what is discussed at the meeting, let's discuss what actually happens at the meeting. Agencies will receive a merger informational packet 2 weeks before the meeting to review. NCDOT will typically give a presentation to review project background, issues, etc. Then, once all information has been presented, there will be an opportunity for questions and discussion among the merger team. Concurrence will either be achieved or not. We'll discuss later what happens if concurrence is not achieved. One of the main reasons this course is being presented is to increase consistency in the type and level of information provided at concurrence meetings. Consistency will lessen process delays and increase confidence in decision-making by the project team. We are now going to discuss the specifics of detailed information required to be provided to the project team prior to the Concurrence Point 1 meeting for Process 1. A preliminary environmental features map with available information will be prepared. For both new location and widening projects, information presented on the environmental features map at this point will be gathered from readily available sources such as GIS, aerial photography, and existing databases. One primary use is to identify project showstoppers or fatal flaws. Note that unlike Process 2, there is no defined step in Process 1 for developing the preliminary environmental features map. Preliminary limits of the proposed study area will be shown on the environmental features map. Existing and future no-build average daily traffic will be presented if there is a capacity deficiency-related issue. Any public comments received concerning purpose and need, as well as general community concerns, needs to be shared with the merger team. Any other readily available information which may aid in justifying the project's purpose and need and defining the study area needs to be relayed. As mentioned earlier, needs for the proposed action generally fall under one or more of the following areas: capacity deficiencies, safety, system linkage, travel time, access needs, traffic compatibility, legislative mandate, or economic development. Now we will consider each of these general needs and the corresponding detailed information to be provided to the project team for Concurrence Point 1, Process 1. This is an example of an environmental features map that can be presented to the merger team at the Concurrence Point 1 meeting. Features shown on this map include such things as wetlands, streams, floodplains, federal lands, hazardous waste sites, cultural resources, parklands, and other significant human and natural environmental features. Capacity deficiencies are explained by the inability for a transportation system to accommodate the traffic volumes that use them, typically explained in terms of level of service, or LOS in short. Deficiencies can occur along main lines or at intersections. An inadequate number of lanes or extensive queuing or backing up of vehicles at an intersection can cause capacity deficiencies. A capacity analysis of existing conditions should be presented at the Concurrent Point 1 meeting. Additional information that may be presented to better explain capacity deficiencies as a purpose for the proposed project include intermodal relationships, including bicycle and/or pedestrian systems, transit, port facilities, high-occupancy vehicle lanes, and airport facilities. Other area tip projects. Functional classification of the existing roadway network. Project history and background information. Photographs. Roadway geometric deficiencies and accident history. Area transportation plans, local, state, federal, and land use plans. Safety issues are typically demonstrated by an accident analysis that compares accident rates on the travel network within the study area to statewide and national averages for similar facilities. Causes for safety issues might include high traffic volumes, conflicts such as abundance of left turn movements, access points such as driveways, etc., or substandard design such as inadequate sight distance, sharp curvature, inadequate weave distances, etc. One or more of the following should be presented: roadway geometric deficiencies and accident history, emergency evacuation needs, predictive models, location of accidents, physical conditions of any structures. The following may be presented to better explain safety as a purpose for the proposed project: intermodal relationships including bicycle and/or pedestrian systems, transit, port facilities, high occupancy vehicle lanes, and airport facilities, other area tip projects, functional classification, project history and background information, photographs, area transportation plans, local, state, federal, land use plans, capacity analysis of existing conditions, recent safety improvements. This map shows traffic capacity and safety analysis features that can be shown to the merger team at Concurrence Point 1. Green cars represent roadway segments where the crash rate is below statewide averages. Yellow cars represent roadway segments where the crash rate is above the statewide average but below the critical rate. Red cars represent roadway segments where the crash rate is above both the statewide average and the critical rate. Traffic signals with a green bulb show intersections where traffic operates smoothly either current day or in the future design year. Traffic signals with a yellow bulb show intersections where traffic operations are starting to become strained either current day or in the future design year. Traffic signals with a red bulb show intersections where traffic operates with stop-and-go traffic with delays longer than desirable either current day or in the future design year. Photos can be shown of the project to demonstrate needs for the project as well. System linkage, travel time, and access needs are terms that refer to such things as discontinuity of a network, lengthy travel time between 2 points, and inability to access a facility or location. System linkage may be needed, for example, to complete a proposed network or to provide a connection between residential and commercial areas. If traffic from a highly populated area, for example a subdivision, needs to travel on an inadequate facility to access a collector or minor arterial, travel time and system linkage may be needs. Access to an office park from an interstate facility, for example, may become an apparent need as businesses occupy the office park, resulting in increased traffic volumes. For system linkage, travel time, and access needs, one or more of the following will need to be presented: roadway network discontinuity, travel time comparison, travel demand, origin-destination studies, intrastate strategic corridor systems, intrastate, interstate, national highway system, etc., military, homeland security needs, access needs. The following may be presented to better explain system linkage, travel time, and access needs as a purpose for the proposed project. Intermodal relationships including bicycle pedestrian systems, transit, port facilities, high occupancy vehicle lanes, and airport facilities. Functional classification, project history and background information including community issues, photographs, roadway geometric deficiencies and accident history, area transportation plans, local, state, federal, land use plans, capacity analysis of existing conditions. Traffic compatibility involves conflicts that arise due to traffic. For example, an action is needed to accommodate increased pedestrian traffic at a school, a recently constructed walkable neighborhood, etc. Or there has been an increase in truck traffic requiring the need for dedicated turn lanes or an improved intersection. For traffic compatibility, one or more of the following will need to be presented: roadway geometric deficiencies and accident history, such as truck accident rates; community issues such as vibration, time of operation, noise, or visual impacts; trucking data from local businesses; pedestrian conflicts. The following may be presented to better explain traffic compatibility as a purpose for the proposed project: intermodal relationships, including bicycle pedestrian systems, transit, port facilities, high occupancy vehicle lanes, and airport facilities. Other area tip projects, functional classification, project history and background information, photographs, area transportation plans, local, state, federal, land use plans, capacity analysis of existing conditions. Legislative mandates may exist that apply to specific travel routes such as strategic highway corridors or the interstate system. Funding sources may also be an issue. For example, if a planned route does not comply with legislation developed for a loop project, funding may not be available. For legislative mandates, one or more of the following will need to be presented: intrastate system, interstate system, other congressional or legislative designation, strategic highway corridor, area transportation plan, local, state, federal. The following may be presented to better explain legislative mandate as a purpose for the proposed project: intermodal relationships, including bicycle pedestrian systems, transit, port facilities, high occupancy vehicle lanes and airport facilities, other area tip projects, functional classification, project history and background information, existing traffic and future no-build average daily traffic, roadway geometric deficiencies and accident history, land use plans, capacity analysis of existing conditions. Economic development or land use changes can also be a project need and is closely linked with providing access. A project or action may be needed in an area where access does not exist or is poor in order to invite or enhance development. If economic development is the sole basis for the project need, it needs to be demonstrated that there will be benefits achieved. Present one or more of the following: area transportation plans, local, state, federal; land use plans; areas of interest to local citizens and elected officials; economic initiatives plans; economic demographics; existing or future development needs such as new employment centers, schools, or recreation centers; Department of Commerce data; plans for supporting infrastructure. The following may be presented to better explain economic development as a purpose for the proposed project: intermodal relationships, including bicycle pedestrian systems, transit, port facilities, high occupancy vehicle lanes, and airport facilities; other area tip projects, functional classification, project history and background information, photographs, roadway geometric deficiencies and accident history, capacity analysis. Now we will discuss the steps associated with Process 2 for Concurrence Point 1. Process 2 begins with the same first two steps as Process 1. Step 1 is initiation of the project study. Step 2 is data collection. The responsibility for conducting Steps 1 and 2 is the NCDOT Project Development Engineer. From this point further, the steps leading up to the Concurrence Point 1 meeting are different from Process 1. Step 3 in Process 2 is the development of an environmental features map. An environmental features map, as discussed in Process 1, is developed to illustrate resource areas of concern on topographical and photogrammetric base mapping. The purpose of an environmental features map is to provide a means for identifying alternatives that warrant study on a screening level basis. Features found on the initial environmental features map include the following: infrastructure and topography; community features, for example, jurisdictional boundaries, schools, churches, community centers, hospitals, and certain demographic populations, such as groups of elderly, low income, transit dependent, handicapped, or a minority; floodplains; cultural resources such as historic architectural properties, archaeology, and parks; wetlands, streams, buffers, river basins, water supply watersheds, and Section 303D resources; wildlife refuge and game lands; recreational areas and parks; hazardous material sites; existing and future land use mapping; threatened and endangered species occurrences; significant natural heritage program areas; and utilities. The responsibility for developing the environmental features map is the NCDOT Project Development Engineer. This is a basic example of an environmental features map that was prepared for a project roughly 1.5 miles long. The environmental features map includes the study area in red, major roadways are labeled, municipal boundaries are shown in yellow, a major future industrial park is shown in orange, schools and churches are shown with GIS symbols, delineated streams and ponds are shown in blue, with delineated streams shown as blue and green hatching. Delineated streams from an adjacent NCDOT project are shown in light green. A significant natural heritage area is shown in pink hatching, and a large county park is shown with the dark green transparency. The next 3 steps were previously discussed in Process 1. Develop purpose and need, which is Step 4 in Process 2. Develop the project team, which is Step 5 in Process 2. And project scoping and conducting a start of study meeting or scoping meeting, which is Step 6 in Process 2. The responsibility for conducting Steps 4, 5, and 6 falls with the NCDOT Project Development Engineer. Step 7 in Process 2 is holding a public meeting. A public meeting is held to introduce the public to the project after the project scoping meetings are held. The public will be informed of the upcoming scope of work. Also, the public will be informed that NCDOT and agency staff will begin work, such as surveys and other investigations in the project vicinity, to gain the necessary information to proceed with the development of the NEPA document. In Process 2, public meetings provide an avenue for obtaining environmental input. Preliminary purpose and need information needs to be presented to the public at the meeting to solicit comments. The responsibility for scheduling and conducting the meeting is with the NCDOT Project Development Engineer. Step 8 in Process 2 is to request environmental input and request preliminary mapping. After the public meeting, the NCDOT Project Development Engineer will request environmental input from the Natural Environment section and the Human Environment section using available mapping and appropriate request forms. A study corridor should be developed, which would encompass the worst-case widening scenario on both sides of the existing facility. There are exceptions to this. For example, when evaluating the environmental features, there may be a best-fit scenario. This will be discussed in greater detail when we talk about Concurrence Point 2 for alternatives. Also, after the public meeting, the roadway design engineer, in conjunction with the project development engineer, will request either preliminary plan sheet mapping or final surveys and base plan sheets, so the plan sheets and environmental delineation will be available for the Concurrence Point 2 meeting. It should be noted that final surveys will normally be requested for projects that are less than 5 miles in length. Preliminary plan sheet mapping will normally be requested for projects that are long, greater than 5 miles, and have multiple project segments. The specific details presented at the Concurrence Point 1 meeting for Process 2 are very similar to Process 1. An environmental features map is prepared illustrating resource areas of concern to identify alternatives that warrant study on a screening level basis. Such features on the mapping will include infrastructure and topography, community features, floodplains, cultural resources, surface water features, parks, refuges and game lands, hazardous materials sites, utilities, etc. For both new location and widening projects, information presented on the environmental features map at this point will be gathered from readily available sources such as GIS, aerial photography, and existing databases. Preliminary limits of the proposed study area should be on the environmental features map. Be sure to demonstrate and define the logical termini with justification for their designation. Any public comments received concerning purpose and need and general community concerns should be summarized. Any other readily available information which may aid in justifying the project's purpose and need and defining the study area should be included. As mentioned earlier, needs for the proposed action generally fall under one of the following areas: capacity deficiencies, safety, system linkage, travel time, access needs, traffic compatibility, legislative mandate, or economic development. The same detail information as discussed for Process 1 will be required at the Concurrence Point 1 meeting for Process 2. In conclusion, why is achieving Concurrence Point 1 important? Establishing Concurrence Point 1 provides the foundation upon which justification for the project is established under NEPA and Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. It provides a baseline purpose and need from which alternative scenarios can be developed. Since all viable alternatives must meet the project's purpose and need, it is extremely important to have a good, solid, well-worded purpose and need that does not prematurely pre-exempt potentially viable alternatives. Care should be taken to avoid wording a purpose and need statement so narrowly that a full range of alternatives cannot be adequately addressed. A clear and well-justified purpose and need statement also explains to the public and decision makers that the expenditure of funds is necessary and worthwhile. In addition, although environmental impacts are expected to be caused by the proposed project, the purpose and need should justify why some level of impacts are acceptable based on the project's importance. We're now going to look at a few specific examples of projects that have gone through the merger process and have reached concurrence on Concurrence Point 1. We'll go through a few examples of needs and purposes that were developed for actual projects, then look at their merger packets that were presented at the Concurrence Point 1 meeting, as well as the concurrence forms that were signed to show how the process has worked in the past. The first example is a project on new location located in New Hanover and Pender counties, the US 17 Corridor Study. Process 1 was followed for this project since it is mostly located on new location. This project involves two separate projects that were combined to evaluate both of them from a system-wide perspective. TIP Project U4751 is the proposed 4-mile extension of Military Cutoff Road on new location from US 17 Market Street in Wilmington to the Wilmington Bypass, TIP Project R2405. TIP Project R3300, the Hampstead Bypass, is a proposed multi-lane facility on new location from the Wilmington Bypass to US 17 north of Hampstead. NCDOT gave a presentation to the merger team to review the purpose and need for the project and the study area defined. The purpose for the project is to improve traffic carrying capacity and safety on US 17 and Market Street corridor between Wilmington and Hampstead. The project area is the only coastal area in North Carolina that is accessible by an interstate, I-40, and is also a very popular tourist destination due to the Atlantic Ocean beaches. The southern extent of the study area is a mix of commercial and residential development. The northern area consists of preserved land, undeveloped forests, open fields, and wetlands. We will first look at the study area that was developed. Remember, the study area should encompass the geographic limit of direct impacts within which a reasonable set of alternatives can be developed that would meet the defined purpose and need for the proposed project. The study area shown was initially presented to the merger team at the Concurrence Point 1 meeting. The study area is located in the outer coastal plain with portions of northern New Hanover County and southern Pender County. It is roughly bounded by I-40 to the west, the northern Cape Fear River to the north, the Holly Shelter Game Lands to the northeast, and existing US 17 to the southeast. After further review of the study area during the Concurrence Point 1 meeting, the northeastern boundary was revised to exclude the Holly Shelter Game Lands due to its importance to the federally endangered red-cockaded woodpecker. The game lands are part of a designated primary core red-cockaded woodpecker population of the Mid-Atlantic Coastal Plain Recovery Unit, which makes these lands very important. Any impacts to this primary core population can result in a potential jeopardy call from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Additionally, the study boundary to the southwest was extended to include NC 132, North College Road, as it transitions from I-40 and the US 17 Market Street intersection. The initial study area boundary stopped at Military Cutoff Road, which excluded a potential alternative, improve existing. The needs identified for the project and presented to the merger team were transportation demand, traffic carrying capacity, safety, system linkage. The purpose defined for the project, as agreed to by the merger team members, was to improve the traffic carrying capacity and safety of the US 17 and Market Street corridor in the project area. Following the presentation, the team members were asked to confirm that they agree on the study area defined, as well as the wording of the purpose and need statement. NCDOT can be asked to change the wording on the concurrence form, to attach maps and any other additional information, etc. Then, team members are requested to sign the form. A heading is located at the top of the concurrence form stating the following information. Section 404 NEPA Interagency Agreement. Concurrence Point Number 1. purpose and need. The project title gives a general description of the project. The purpose and need of the proposed action is stated. The purpose of the project is to improve the traffic carrying capacity and safety of the US 17 and Market Street corridor in the project area. A brief description of the study area is also stated on the form. The proposed study area is located within portions of northern New Hanover County and southern Pender County. It is roughly bounded on the west by I-40, on the north by the Northeast Cape Fear River, Holly Shelter Gamelands to the east, and US 17 to the south. A map of the study area as defined by the merger team is then attached to the concurrence form. The statement above the merger team signature line reads, "The project team has concurred with the purpose and need for the proposed project as described above." Remember, the wording on the concurrence form may change on the fly, so bring your laptop and printer to the meeting. Another example of a project that went through the merger process also involves two projects that were separately programmed in the TIP, but were later combined to be evaluated as one project. This project followed Process 2 of the merger process because it involved mostly widening of existing roadways as well as some new location. The general need for the two projects, TIP Project U4734 and U2800, is to provide a direct link between I-40 Business and NC-150 northwest of Kernersville. The two projects are located on the Kernersville Thoroughfare Plan and forms part of a planned loop around Kernersville. The two study areas that were initially defined for each project, U4734 shown in red and U2800 shown in yellow, were combined as one large study area. The two study areas combined formed an area with which a reasonable set of alternatives could be developed. Local officials identified the need for a direct transportation link between I-40 Business and NC-150 northeast of Kernersville as an alternative to traversing through the downtown street network that is a non-continuous route, contains many businesses and residential access points, and has several unsignalized and signalized intersections. The need for the project is that no direct link exists between I-40 Business and NC-150 north of Kernersville, with the purpose of the project being to provide a link between I-40 Business and NC-150 north of Kernersville. Here you can see the concurrence form documenting the decisions the merger team agreed to.